Melanie?
Thank you, Susan, and hello, everyone. I'm excited to introduce today's speaker and grantee. Her name is Michelle Siri, and she is the Executive Director of the Women's Law Center of Maryland, which is a nonprofit legal services organization dedicated to ensuring the physical safety, economic security, and bodily autonomy of women in Maryland. Practicing attorney since 2003, she began her career as a law clerk in the Baltimore City Circuit Court, spent 5 years in private practice and 6 years as an assistant attorney general representing the Department of Juvenile Services in labor and employment-related issues before joining the Women's Law Center in 2015. She is the immediate past president of Maryland Carey Law School Alumni Board, president of the board of the Maryland Legislative Agenda for Women, and vice president of the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence. She also sits on the board of the Baltimore County Bar Association and on the section council of the MSBA's Delivery of Legal Services section, and is the former board president of Planned Parenthood of Maryland. She is a fellow of the Maryland Bar Foundation, the Public Policy Conflict Resolution Fellowship Program, and the Towson University Professional Leadership for Women Program, and a member of the Executive Alliance. She's been awarded the Women's Bar Association's Rita C. Davidson Award, the Baltimore County Bar Association Judith P. Ritchie Award, the Daily Records Leadership in the Law Award, and is a member of the Daily Records Circle of Excellence for having been named 3 times to Maryland's Top 100 Women. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Michelle Siri.
Thank you so much, Melanie. And really thank you to the Giving Circle, not just for having me here today and letting me share a little bit about what we do and who we are, but for supporting our organization and so many other organizations. It's really important work that you do. And just like Martha said, you all bring women together and work to find solutions. And as the Executive Director of the Women's Law Center of Maryland, I couldn't be happier with that mission and prouder to be a part of it. So I am here today to talk about our organization, and I'm going to kind of split it up a little bit into 2 parts. The first part is kind of a general overview of what we do, and I'll go kind of quickly, even though I've got a lot of details in these slides, just to give you an idea of who we are and what we're doing. And then I'd like to spend the second portion talking more about the project that is specifically being funded right now by the Giving Circle, and that's our Madobe project. And I'll get a little bit more into the details of what it is that the support and funding of the Giving Circle is going to. We're a nice small group today, so please feel free. You can put yourself in gallery if you want to kind of still, you're side by side to see me. You can interject and ask questions. I would love this to be an interactive, conversation with you all. So please feel free. And also, I do tend to speak kind of quickly. So if I'm going too quickly, let me know and I'm happy to slow down. But as Melanie was saying, we are a statewide nonprofit legal services provider, which is a really fancy way of saying that we are a nonprofit law firm that provides legal services for free. So our clients don't pay a thing for their representation, so long as they are survivors of intimate partner violence or sexual assault, depending on the project. And our vision, as you can see, is a legal system that provides fairness and justice for women. We have been around for almost 50 years. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary next May. And so we started out as a small group of law students and recent law grads in the early 70s. Who were really looking at employment discrimination and pregnancy discrimination. Women could still be fired for becoming pregnant. They were ineligible for unemployment benefits for when they became pregnant. One of our big cases in the very beginning was a woman who wanted to register to vote using her maiden name. She always used that as her professional business title, and the Board of Elections wouldn't allow her to do that. So those were the types of issues that we were dealing with in the early 70s when we were formed. Our mission has changed and grown. And so our mission now is really, it's broad. It's to ensure the physical safety, the economic security, and the bodily autonomy of women in Maryland. And as I said, we've grown throughout the years. And so it's really through 3 main pillars that we accomplish our work. So that first is that direct legal services, and we'll get way more into that in a few minutes. But that is, survivors of intimate partner violence in protective order hearings. That's sometimes people call it the TV always calls it a restraining order, but in Maryland, we call it a protective order, right? So we do protective order hearings, we do family law matters, custody, divorce, anything that's collaterally related, and then immigration proceedings. And that's our Medovi project that we'll talk about more. It's an attorney, it's a legal advocate as well, who can help do safety planning, who can do accompaniments to criminal hearings and things like that. So we provide all of those kind of wraparound legal services. Then we also have information and referral, and those are two of our hotlines. We've got folks that can call from across the state and ask us free questions, or ask us questions for free from an attorney. And then the last thing we do is our advocacy. And we'll break this down a little bit as well, but no, go ahead, Jeff, thank you. So our direct legal services, we've got protective order and advocacy representation project. Some of you may have heard of the House of Ruth. Well, in the early 1990s, the Women's Law Center and the House of Ruth partnered together and formed the very first PORP project. Now I'm happy to say that every single county in Maryland has a PORP project, or at least a PORP attorney. Sometimes it might be one project that covers a couple of counties, like on the Eastern Shore, but every single county has somebody who can provide free representation for protective order hearings. And so the Women's Law Center, we cover Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and Carroll County. House of Ruth, for example, also covers Baltimore City since it's a big jurisdiction, and they have Prince George's County, Montgomery County, I believe, as well. Our second project, the one that is funded by the Baltimore Women's Giving Circle, is our multi-ethnic domestic violence project, Medovi. And that provides statewide immigration services for survivors of intimate partner violence, sexual assault, sex trafficking, and stalking. And then our newest project is our collateral legal assistance for survivors class. And that is free attorneys for any legal issue that is collaterally related to a person's status. And what we found was that our attorneys for our PORP project and Medovi were really frustrated that they couldn't do more. All of our clients were coming to them with multiple legal issues. And they were restricted by their projects, and they really couldn't help them. And they were always referring them out to folks, which was re-traumatizing and very difficult to find an attorney that would be willing to do pro bono work on divorce and custody primarily. And so we started that project, and it's been immensely successful and immensely needed. The demand is very high for that project. So like I said, we've got the hotlines, we've got a family law and employment law hotline. Employment law hotline is fully volunteer driven. Family law hotline is staffed by 2 attorneys that kind of split the time. I don't need to get too much into those details. And then the third thing that we do is our advocacy. And that is really broken down into legislative advocacy. So I am a registered lobbyist. I go down to Annapolis, every session, and the past year, even though it was a really abbreviated session and a little bit weird because it was on Zoom, you can see that we were still really, really active on anything that really touches that mission. We're also involved in appellate advocacy. If there's any lawyers on the call, you may be familiar with amicus briefs. That means a friend of the court brief. So it's a case that we're not involved in, but we think is a very important issue that touches on our mission. And so we might send something and say, I know that the people that are litigating this are litigating these issues, but we want the court to think about this on a broader spectrum. We want the court to think about this from a women's rights or a gender justice perspective. And then the last thing we do is we are involved in what's called judicial selections. As a legal organization, it's really our duty, we think, to help maintain a judiciary that is free of bias, that is reflective of race and gender and other representations of our community. And so we provide letters of interviews and letters of recommendation for candidates. All right. This is just, if anyone's ever interested, you can take a look at our org chart. The bottom line is we're pretty small. We're a small but mighty organization. We have a small admin team that I'm very proud to say we just kind of expanded to have now a full-time development director and a full-time admin person. Up until now, we were working with part-time for both of those. And so we are, like I said, small but mighty. All right, and the way that we approach all of our work, the most important thing for us, of course, those dogs are gonna start barking right when I'm presenting, I apologize. The most important thing for us is always to be client-centered, right? We wanna make sure that we are meeting the needs of our clients where they are and not imposing our beliefs or our experiences upon them. And so one way we do this is through trauma-informed lawyering. So, this is a quote, this is the actual definition. It's, we're trying to prevent re-traumatization. We're trying to recognize the role that trauma plays and how the attorney-client relationship can sometimes increase that trauma. And we're trying to make sure that we avoid that. All right, next slide. Thank you. So some of the main things that we do is recognizing that memory is an issue. So it's really important for us to realize that a client who has experienced trauma isn't going to necessarily be able to tell their story in a very linear fashion. And it's up to us to A, recognize that and be patient with that, and B, help translate that to the court. So when we're in court representing our clients, the judge might get really frustrated. They might get impatient because the client's not telling their story in that straightforward way. And it's up to us to recognize that and help educate the court. Also, clients might sometimes, be very passionate talking about one thing, but then when it gets down to the actual abuse, they'll suddenly have an affect that's very removed and cool and calm. And that's usually a result of trauma brain. And that's a result of them protecting themselves. And so we do all of these things. We recognize these things. We do it all with the bottom line being empowerment. So we want to give our clients control. They are driving the bus. We're just kind of giving some suggestions. We give suggestions, they make decisions is really what it is. And we want them to walk away feeling that they were the ones in control of things. And then the second thing that's really important is to avoid that re-traumatization. So I talked about our class project, for example. Madobe often refers clients to class. And the nice part about doing all this in-house is that client doesn't have to go and retell their story over and over again and relive that pain over and over again. All right, so what is the Baltimore Women's Giving Circle supporting through the Women's Law Center in Maryland? I'd like to think you support all of our work, but specifically your funding is for the Multi-Ethnic Domestic Violence Project. And so that provides free and low-cost immigration legal services, and I'll get to that low cost in a second. It serves anyone statewide, although the very huge bulk of our clients are in Baltimore City and the Baltimore metro region, who've experienced domestic violence, human sex trafficking, sexual assault, and also also stalking, which I didn't have on here. And it's staffed by a project director who's an attorney and then a bilingual legal advocate. So every once in a while, the federal government has a beautiful moment of genius. Maybe not all the time, but every once in a while it happens. And what happened maybe 20 years ago was that they recognized that foreign-born survivors of crime, victims of crime, have very different challenges than other victims of crime, particularly when it comes to their legal status in this country. So taking a survivor of intimate partner violence or sexual assault, for example, what they were finding was the abuser, who typically has status in this country, either as a citizen themselves or they have their green card, would hold those papers and say every time they abuse them, if you go to the police, I'm getting you deported. If you go to the police, I'm getting your children deported. They often would prevent them from working. They would isolate them even more from their families. And so these victims were in this unique position where they would not be coming forth, even more so than traditional survivors of this type of violence. Now the government has, they have their own reasons for doing things. And one of the reasons they were doing it was they wanted folks to cooperate and to cooperate with the criminal investigations and with charges. And so, so this allows our clients who are victims of crime to get their status independent of their abuser. So that doesn't matter if they're here on green card with their husband or if they both, have come through and they're being sponsored by this person. They can circumvent that policy so long as they meet certain criteria. So one is the VAWA self-petition, that's that little blue square. So if they are married to the legal resident, permanent resident, or US citizen, they can file a self-petition. The U status, which is the red square on the left, that's if they're a victim of a qualifying crime like domestic violence, and they cooperate then, right? So they're actually going to go to the courthouse. It doesn't mean that there has to be a conviction. It just means that they have to cooperate. And so that's a really brave thing for our clients to do. It gets them a lot. It gets them this great benefit of being able to have independent status and become, a citizen. but it's a very, very brave thing that they have to do and go and testify in court, sign affidavits with the state's attorney, things like that. Next slide, Jeff, thanks. There we go. So this talks a little bit about, and I don't know if folks on here are familiar at all with the power and control wheel. It's a device that's used in any sort of domestic violence work that kind of talks about the different types of control and abuse. And this talks a little bit about how specifically it can be different for foreign-born victims. So it might have things in there instead of just the normal physical abuse and economic abuse. It also is going to have the intimidation, the denying of privileges, the sending, threatening with the burning, like cutting up the green card and things like that. All right. Somehow or another, I got very fancy on this one PowerPoint slide, even though I'm not entirely sure how I did that. So some of the obstacles for our immigrant clients, our foreign-born clients, there's language barriers. So 91% of our clients are Latino, and I believe 67% of them either don't speak English or have minimal English speaking skills. So especially if the abuser speaks English, especially if that abuser is an American citizen, that's a huge power dynamic over our clients.
Michelle, we have a question.
Yes.
In the chat.
In the chat. I'm so sorry. I didn't notice that. Does emotional abuse count as physical? So it depends. Absolutely. We 100% recognize emotional abuse, economic abuse. We 100%, that is abuse. That is absolutely abuse. It depends on the court whether or not they're going to recognize that. And it depends on the level of the abuse and whether or not there were certain threats and things like that. But we 100% recognize that that is abuse. So most of our clients, they're all foreign-born, obviously, and they don't have legal status in this country. So many of them don't have any understanding of our U.S. legal system. And this might come up on the next slide, but if they do have an understanding of a legal system at all, they're generally, yes, exactly. They're going to have a great mistrust of service providers or law enforcement. A lot of them are coming from countries where the law enforcement is not necessarily certainly they've also heard here that law enforcement might not always be on their side. And so, so they have a huge mistrust of those providers. A lot of service providers aren't going to have cultural competency. And what we mean by that is, again, meeting those clients where they are and recognizing and not imposing our own values on them. And so, for example, recognizing, don't saying, well, why didn't you call the police? Instead saying, we're the police called, because that way there's no judgment. And if they said, no, we didn't call them because we were scared of the police, we understand and recognize that. We still need to know that information, but we're asking it in a non-judgmental way. And then the last one is this lack of support. It's oftentimes because they don't have family here, right? They're in a community, they're isolated, they've come here on their own. They might have come just with that partner that's abusing them. And so one of the things that we do with the Adobe project that we started about 3 years ago, and it's the only project where we charge any fees at all. And that's only for clients who have already gone through the process with us and gotten their green card. That's the purpose of this. We will then either do citizenship applications for them, or we will do any of the immigration proceedings for their immediate family. So we already include their children in the work that we do, but their parents, their uncles, because we recognize how important it is for them to have a community here and for them to have support here in this country. So we will charge a very small sliding scale. It's $0, $250, or $500 is all that we charge, where we know that they can go out and get it for, pay usually around $3,000, I think. But this way, the clients, are usually happy to do it, but they've also been here and working. They've had a green card. They have the funds. We waive it if they don't, but it gives them a little bit of investment in getting their families here. And that last part, there's no, until they have that work permit in their hands, they're not allowed to work. They don't get any public benefits. So that's why it's so important. And this journey has such a massive impact. Unfortunately, one of our clients wanted to come today and we just couldn't get the timing right. But it's really amazing the transformation. These clients are with us for years. And under the prior administration, that time actually almost doubled for how long it can take to get documentation. And so we really see folks when they come in, and it's like a physical change and as well as an emotional change, but they come in, we've started tracking now, education levels increase, income certainly increases because they're usually, if they were working at all, they were working under the table before, and now they're able to hold and sustain regular employment. So a little bit about our clients. You can see that they're really from all over. This is our current clients. If we went with all the clients we've ever had, I think there'd be even more blue or purple, whatever color you want to call that. I will say 100% of our primary clients currently are women. So that means the survivor clients are all women. If you take into account then their derivative claims, it's 84% are women. But that number, those derivatives, are either their minor children, or if the client themselves is a minor, which happens occasionally, then their parents. So that's where the only time when we have clients that are men, that we have had clients that are men, it's been that way. It's not by design. We're happy to take male clients, and we have had some clients who are men in the past. It just typically, this is how it washes out. I said earlier, 91% of our clients are actually Latino, but we have languages, as you can see, from all over. Our legal advocate does speak, is a fluent Spanish speaker, a native Spanish speaker. And then we use translator services and things called Language Line for all of the other nationalities. And then you can see where our clients are coming from. So the vast majority, again, are Baltimore City, followed by Baltimore County, and then Prince George's County are the three main counties. It's going to be really interesting to see how this changes in the next few years. Because of COVID, I will say that COVID, one of the benefits, one of the good things, the silver linings that has come out of this is we've learned not all of our projects do as well with remote and Zoom and things like that, but Modovi has been really, really successful with it. And I think that's because our clients often were afraid. Our offices are located for Modovi. The project is located in the Baltimore County Circuit, or Baltimore City Circuit Court, excuse me. And clients often were scared. And during the last administration, we had folks that dropped out, and they were like, you know what, I don't even want to do it. I don't want the government having my name or anything. And then they certainly didn't want to come down to a circuit court. And so being able to do things like that, many of our clients are mothers. And so they often had childcare, and they often have a lot of transportation challenges that we don't seem to see in our other projects. And so being able to do remote hearings or remote meetings with the clients has been really, really beneficial. Our clients find us a number of different ways. We have a lot of really strong partnerships with Catholic Charities, with Adelante Center, with Tahare, and our attorney and legal advocate do a lot of community outreach. So folks find us that way, and then they find us through the courts as well. So if somebody, at our own projects, frankly. So if someone's coming in through our protective order project and we're like, you don't have legal status, let's get you into Modovi. So the three projects do a lot of sharing of clients, which is how we kind of imagined the projects to work. They can find us through police, absolutely. I find that that's not a big referral for us. Our protective order project gets more clients that way. Modovi, again, I think those clients are less likely at first to go through the police, but sometimes they do, for sure. All right, so other things that we do are accompaniments, and it's really important because, again, like I said, our clients have a huge mistrust and a fear of the court system and the legal system. And so if they are going to testify against their abuser in criminal court, for example, or if they are going for a custody case or something else, that they just want somebody there with them, we go with them. We help them, we help translate, kind of not just literally, but we help explain what's happening, explain the process so that they're not going into these things alone. And And then the last thing I have are quotes. Again, Madovi is such a lovely, wonderful, beautiful project because we build these relationships with these clients. Suzanne and Elena, who I think some of the Giving Circle members have probably met because they've come and talked to the circle a couple of times and they've brought clients. They connect with these clients and they build these relationships over, again, 7-8 years. And so we get cards quite often, and these are all lovely, lovely things that folks have said and sent to us. And so it really, I think it's inspiring. It helps keep our staff going when they hear these things. This is, as you can imagine, really hard work for them. And it can be really draining. And, you know, we've all been going through such a challenging time the past 1.5 years, almost 2 years now. And I think that knowing that their clients believe in them and their clients, you know, they're not doing it for the thanks at all, but it certainly makes things a little bit easier for them. I think that may have been our last slide. Yes. So, you know, to sum up, the work that we do, it's meaningful to us. The work that you all support is incredibly meaningful. That project has such a huge impact. We have almost about 70 new clients each year. That means it's a caseload because, again, those clients last for 7-8 years. So just those 2 individuals have over 200 clients, close to 3, I think, right now. And then in addition, they're kind of subject matter experts. And so they reached out to and provided what's called technical assistance to well over 300 different organizations and individuals just in the past year alone. And so the impact, like I said, is huge. The support that we get from you all has been immense. And I'm happy to answer any other questions about our work, about the project, or about, you know, the gender justice work that we do in general.
Michelle, what is the qualification process for women who come to your organization? How does that work?
That's a great question. So for some projects, we have one small one that I didn't even mention on here, which is called Judicare, and that is income-based because the funder requires it to be income-based. But for the projects that I've mentioned, CLASS, Madovi, and PORP, the only qualification is that we believe that they're the true victims or survivors of intimate partner violence. And for Madovi, also sexual assault, human trafficking, and stalking. That's the only qualification. So we don't make them jump through hoops. For whatever reason, if they want to come to us and we believe that they're the true survivors, we're going to represent them.
So it can happen quickly that, you know, you start working with them.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for PORP, for example, it's usually a 7-day turnaround before, you know, if they've gone and filed what's called a interim or a temporary protective order, they do that on their own generally. And then they have 7 days before the actual hearing occurs. And so they'll come to us. That's, you know, a very quick turnaround. Madovi can be a little bit different because of the cyclical nature of the work. And it's very, it's a transactional, it's not a litigation project. So it's all paperwork. And so what they do is they'll kind of stagger like month on, month off about, you know, taking intakes and things like that, but they'll, you know, they get everybody in. They'll say, you know, it's going to be this long of a project. We're going to have your intake next month. In the meantime, here's your homework. Madovi is really great. They really firmly believe in homework, and they work really well with their clients. And it actually, because of the type of project it is, it goes back to that empowerment. They're saying, you know, we can't find, you know, we can't tell your story. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have to write it down. We'll translate it for you. We'll help put in the legalese and tell you what needs to be in there, but you have to tell your story. And so they'll give them like a month to kind of work on that narrative, for example, that would go into the ultimate application and things like that.
It's really amazing. Just real quick on a technical side, if you are still on speaker view and you want to switch to gallery for discussion purposes, and if you're on a computer in the upper right-hand corner, you can switch to gallery view. And if you're on a tablet, it's in the lower left-hand corner. And also I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer in a minute. We can continue our discussion, but I just want to thank you, Michelle, and the Women's Law Center for the amazing work you're doing. It really is life-changing, and it's wonderful to hear how the Women's Giving Circle is really supporting the Madovi project, which is incredible. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Bedford, and we can continue discussion, and she can take it from there.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thanks, Melanie. Thank you, Michelle. I wanted to, before we do some more introductions, I wanted to see if people had any more questions for Michelle. I have one too. I can start us off. In terms of, you mentioned sort of trauma, trauma-aware approach. Do you help with referrals from mental health care, or how does that work in terms of a holistic approach to getting them through?
Absolutely, absolutely. We're big supporters and proponents of mental health care, both for our clients and our attorneys as well, because again, like I said, secondary trauma is something that we're very cognizant of. So we have a whole host of referrals. We work and partner actually with a number of different crisis centers within hospitals, and we work to connect folks. We don't have anybody in-house. We're a law firm, but we do make referrals all the time. And
do you think that over the course of the many decades that the Women's Law Center has been in existence, has there been, you said there's the distrust of police and discomfort around the legal system and courts, any improvement in the relationship between the police and these kinds of, particularly around domestic violence?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think it ebbs and wanes. It depends on the news cycle, frankly, sometimes. There have been some pretty bad news reports out lately, especially for sexual assault victims and the way that the court system treats them and treats perpetrators. I think some things have been more incumbent upon us to respond and change how we've been practicing and approaching things. So again, when I talked about, cultural competency, it's recognizing that the legal system might not be for everybody. It doesn't mean that they're not deserving of assistance and referrals and support and safety planning. But if a woman comes to us and they have experienced in their life, in their community, law enforcement and legal system that has betrayed their people and makes them feel unsafe, then who am I to say you have to go get a protective order? That's the only way to help you. I mean, I do think that, protective orders can save lives, but they're not the only way. And so we've been trying really hard to make sure that our approach is recognizing and cognizant of those issues. And again, it's meeting those folks where they are and saying, if this is not what you need, if this is not what's going to make you feel safe, let's get you what you need, whether that's through other referrals or through our own safety planning and work.
Thank you.
I have a question. There was an article this weekend in the New York Times about a woman who was a domestic violence victim, and the kind of cycle of, going to file and then she would retract it, and then going to file and she would retract it. It also mentioned how often restraining orders or protective orders don't work. Have you found a lot of that, or do the women that come to you sort of stick with it, and do the restraining orders work?
Yes and no. I'm such a lawyer, right? I'm always going to be like, it depends. I think, there are studies that say that the number one indication of whether someone's going to leave their abuser, it's not necessarily the protective order, it's actually having a lawyer. So I don't mean to overinflate the importance of a lawyer, but it's not a luxury. It can be a lifesaver. And I think part of that is because they realize, they learn the system and they learn what other avenues there are to support them. We certainly respect women's right, and we absolutely want to make sure that they have the autonomy to either withdraw their petition later on, or if they back out and don't want to do it. And we always tell them, it is your choice. We will still be here for you if you come back and change your mind. We don't represent them in those withdrawals. It just becomes a weird conflict for us, but we provide them resources and support, and we always let them know that they can come back. Then whether or not a protective order works, I think, it is to a certain extent just a piece of paper. And if someone is intent on committing a vicious act of violence or murder, that paper might not stop them. But in a lot of cases, it is going to be enough to start setting up some boundaries that then allow the survivor to then take one more step away and one more step away and extricate themselves. So in a lot of cases, it can be very effective. But is it going to save everybody? Unfortunately, no. I wish it would, but it doesn't. I see a question in the chat. Sorry, let me pull that up. So there is no waiting list. It just, well, I say that there's no waiting list. Like I said, they stagger. So they might be like, we've got 30 people this month. We're going to take you next month, but they get everybody. There's no, we don't have like a limit due to funding. We've talked about whether it'd be helpful to bring in another attorney. That would always be dependent on funding because there, you know, it is a high demand project. But because of the way that the system works and because of the long lines or wait times from the government, it actually allows us to take on a lot of clients. Well, thank you all again so much for supporting us, for supporting our work, for supporting legal services. It really means a lot to us. We love partnering with the Giving Circle. And I am going to put my email address in the chat. So please feel free. I'm going to hop off so you all can have the rest of your meeting, but feel free to reach out to me if you have more questions. I'm always happy to talk to people.
Thank you again, Michelle.